Labour Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has warned there won't be additional funding for the National Health Service without major reform if Labour gets into Downing Street at the next election.
He also outlined plans to bring in the private sector and weekend services to cut waiting times. But will it work, and will he face the wrath of the unions?
And Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting joins us live now. Mr Streeting, I was reading your article in The Sun this morning, in which you say that the NHS is a 20th century service which hasn't changed with the times. You say pouring more money in without reform would be like pouring water into a leaky bucket. Now, pouring water into a leaky bucket would be a bad idea. Is what's going on here, you are paving the way for telling us that you're not going to be able to put more money into the National Health Service?
Well, Labour's already made some significant commitments for additional investment, but in every single case, that investment is linked to reform. So because we know that action is needed to cut waiting lists, and some hospitals have shown us how to do that with clinics that work at evenings and weekends, albeit with a cost attached because you have to pay staff fairly, obviously, to do that work. We've committed £1.1 billion to cut NHS waiting lists, providing 2 million appointments a year to get those waiting lists down. But that's linked to the reform element of extra evening and weekend working. On mental health, where we've committed £750 million to make sure that we address the mental health crisis, particularly affecting young people, that's not just more money for the existing system, it's new services, making sure that we get to young people sooner through support in every primary and secondary school and community mental health hubs in every community. And even on scanners, where we've committed to double the number of diagnostic CT and MRI scanners over the course of the Parliament. That's not just more scanners, it's AI-enabled scanners so that we can diagnose faster and more accurately, getting more people diagnosed because you can do more scans. So that investment is also linked to reform. And that's the argument I'm making to the NHS and actually to the country, because we want a mandate for this reform. I think people can see the NHS is going through what is objectively the worst crisis in its history. We see that through the terrible performance standards. People love the NHS. We've all got stories, myself included, about how the NHS has saved lives of people we love. In my case, literally saved my own life. But we also know that loving the NHS isn't enough. We've got to make sure that we modernise the NHS as well as invest in it so that in the next 75 years, we can continue to have that NHS we've loved for the last 75 years, which is a public service.
The reason why I was
free
asking
at the point of use, there for us when we need it.
The reason I was asking you if you were preparing us for bad news is that you've given us a whole list there of places where you want to spend more on scanners, reducing waiting times, on dentistry. That was all to be paid for by the abolition of the non-domicile tax break. The Chancellor did that in his budget 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks later, we still had nothing from Labour about how they're going to fund those NHS pledges. If there's no more money coming from Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, doesn't that mean that you're not going to be able to go ahead with those changes, that extra money for the NHS?
Well, to be fair to Rachel Reeves, and this is not the first time this has happened to Labour, the Tories took a policy that, this is abolishing the non-dom tax status, that they said wouldn't work, would drive people out of our country and wouldn't raise the money that we said it would, attacking Labour's credibility on the policy. And what have the Tories done? They've nicked our policy and actually projected it will raise even more money than Labour predicted, as well as leaving a few loopholes in there for Rishi Sunak's friends. So,
but aren't you describing your problem there?
Pretty solid grounds in terms of our credibility.
Yeah, but hang on, Wes Streeting. I mean, what they've done is they've taken the money you were going to spend on the NHS and they spent it on somewhere else. 4 weeks on, you've not been given any more extra money by Rachel Reeves.
Well, there's a judgment call for Rachel Reeves to make on two fronts. One is, does she find savings elsewhere or does she raise the money in a different way? And the second is the timing of Rachel's decision. Does she make an announcement now where the Tories might swoop in like magpies again and pinch Labour's policy, or does she wait until later in the year? Those are judgments for Rachel Reeves to make, and we'll be having more about that to say soon. The important thing is that Rachel has been absolutely clear that those policies I've announced, every single one of them, are Labour commitments for our manifesto. They are fully costed and they will be fully funded, as all of Labour's policies will, because we won't make the same mistakes that the Tories have made of reckless tax cuts, reckless holes in the budget, which have crashed the economy and left people paying through the nose with higher rents, higher mortgages, higher bills. And that's why even where the government try and give money back with one hand, the country knows they've taken far more with the other, and we're all still.
The problem is, Wes Streeting, it's really actually quite hard to find.
Not going to make those mistakes.
The problem is, it's hard to find £1.6 billion just like that. 4 weeks on, she hasn't done it yet. If she only gets half the money, which of the things which you've promised will you drop?
I don't need to make that judgment, because Rachel has already indicated, not just to me privately, but she said very clearly, very publicly, that we are committed to those pledges. So I am 100% certain that all of those pledges will be fully costed and fully funded, and Rachel will have more to say about that as a Shadow Chancellor in due course. As you'll know, Ed, Shadow Cabinet members do not tend to go out making announcements on behalf of Shadow Chancellors, because we wouldn't have our kneecaps left at the end of it.
Just want to talk to you about the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, saying that Angela Rayner's council house, whether it's her primary residence or not, undoubtedly is not going away. And actually, it's now damaging Sir Keir Starmer, making a fool of your leader. Where do you stand on this?
I think Angela's been really clear all the way through this, actually, which is she paid her right amount of taxes at the time. When Michael Ashcroft published his book and she started receiving questions about whether she had paid her taxes, I think she did what any of us would have done in that situation, which is to say, well, I better go back and just be absolutely sure, because tax is complicated and sometimes people do make honest mistakes. She went back, she got advice, and she's certain she paid the right amount of tax. I think that really is the beginning and the end of it. At the end of the day,
unfortunately, you know, it's still dominating the front pages. It's still affecting. It could now well be affecting a sort of trust and impression of Keir Starmer as well, and Labour. And you know, things come to light, like social media. She posted saying she was happy to be home, and it wasn't the primary residence. She said whether or not it's right that she should be challenged in this way, it's definitely affecting the perception of the situation.
Well, I don't think it should. I've not seen anything in any newspaper that suggests that Angela Rayner hasn't been, in her usual way, entirely upfront and straightforward. Angela's life is not straightforward. It's not an unorthodox or traditional or conventional story and upbringing. And that's what makes Angela stand out in British politics, actually. She's not a typical politician. She's not had the same sort of background most politicians have. There are a number of us in the Shadow Cabinet that are from working class backgrounds, and nothing that she said about her life or indeed her taxes, which is the challenge being put to her, suggests that she hasn't been anything other than entirely truthful. And at the end of the day, we all have to make our tax returns to HMRC. They will have seen all of the reports about this. If she hasn't paid her taxes fairly, I'm sure the tax man will be knocking at the door. But I'm not Angela's tax advisor. I'm not her tax man. And I think she has been, in her usual way, very straightforward, honest and open about her tax affairs. And I don't think she's got anything else to say about it.
OK, well, good to talk to you this morning. Lovely to chat to you.